One April morning in 1945, this was the centre of the world. All around the tiny island of Ieshima, the Battle of Okinawa was raging. This was the beginning of the Allied invasion of Japan. Soon, American bombers and fighters would fill the skies above. But first, on land, the critical infrastructure would have to be built. US fighter planes, lacking the flying range of bombers, would need runways to land and refuel on Ieshima. The task of building these fell to a young lieutenant from the newly formed Engineer Aviation Regiment, Milton Schwartz of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. 26-year-old Milton had studied architecture at Penn State. Expecting America would be pulled into the war, he had signed up for the university's advanced ROTC program. Upon graduation, he was made a lieutenant, and when he presented himself in uniform to his grandfather, he heard the old man tearfully cry, "Only in America can a Jewish boy become an army officer." Milton had crossed the Pacific Ocean as part of a lumbering, ever-growing, massive fleet of ships. He had witnessed kamikaze attacks and had lived through the initial Battle of Okinawa. But what lay ahead would be just as daunting. Without fully understanding the on-site conditions, the Army Corps of Engineers back in America had thought that runway mats made of prefabricated steel would prove effective. But when this approach didn't work, Milton turned his ingenious mind to the problem. He was helped in no small part by the body-boosting eggs he got to enjoy, courtesy of a one-legged chicken given to him upon arrival. Now 100 years old, he recalls how he found an unexpected solution.
The interesting about the coral, we went over there knowing nothing about using coral for construction. I had done some of it in Florida, but we certainly didn't expect to be building runways out of coral. We had shiploads of metal landing gear that we were supposed to build, somehow create runways with them. And that was a time-consuming, terrible job because the fighters landed on, bumped them and bent them up and so forth. And very soon we learned that if you go dig up coral, spread it, and roll it, you have the best possible surface in the world. So we took all this metal landing strip, reloaded the boats with them, told the captains, take the boats out as far as you can and dump them. We can't use them, but we can use the shipping. And that's what we did. So the ocean floor to the east of Okinawa, to this day, I'm sure, is littered with metal landing strips. We never used them. And we could build a coral runway in 10 days by just taking the coral out, spreading it, rolling it, and then later in the operation, we oiled it. So we reduced the amount of dust.
Milton couldn't know it then, but the runways he built would also be where Japanese planes would land for the surrender that ended the war with Japan. And more than 70 years later, the infrastructure he built would still be in use. After the war, Milton returned to a booming Philadelphia. The military had promoted him to major, but unwilling to become a career officer, he had left to pursue architecture, his true love. He began teaching at the University of Pennsylvania, where the architectural department was going through a momentous shift from Beaux-Arts pedagogy to one modelled after Walter Gropius's Bauhaus. At the same time, Philadelphia was undergoing a period of drastic post-war liberalisation.
Someone said that the Reform Democrats were a sea of purity in an ocean of corruption. And they brought planning to Philadelphia and things like that, agencies for housing and ways of doing planning. And that was looked upon as a wonderful reform.
Dean Holmes Perkins was appointed specifically to usher in a new era at the university. As he set about changing the school, he laid off many professors and instructors, but not Milton, who soon found himself working with future stars of architecture, like Blanche Lemko van Ginkel and Hans Bergström, as well as the world-renowned Louis Kahn, who joined the University of Pennsylvania in 1955, 8 years after Milton. It seemed as if academia had provided Milton with a landing point after the war. But while teaching, he was already developing his professional practice. He came into contact with John Elmo Sweet, an established architect 14 years his senior. They decided to go into business and for a while built a successful practice together. Milton designed projects like the Presidential Apartments, a vast complex with more than 2,800 units, and the Flamingo, where he used an innovative, high-speed construction method. He was finishing projects at an astonishing pace, and soon Milton began receiving his own commissions and recognition. A temple in Levittown was lauded by critics for its design and devotion to good architectural principles. All the while, local developers, spurred on by an acute housing shortage, were eager to build. The timing was right, and Milton decided to leave academia behind.
He is someone who will hire young faculty members. See, the long tradition in architecture, you hire very young people because you can't afford to pay more than that. Architecture schools, they're not the poorest in the university, but they're the second or third poorest.
As he had on Ieoshima, the young architect from Philadelphia had once more found himself in the right place at the right time. And once again, he was ready to make his mark. His first big project was Parktown Place, 4 20-story apartment buildings directly opposite the Museum of Art. In 2011, this design would land Milton on the National Register of Historic Places. According to the citation, Parktown Place was the first time that the modernism made famous by Le Corbusier had arrived in Philadelphia. Professor David Brownlee, an instrumental voice in Philadelphia achieving World Heritage City status, identifies Milton Schwartz as one of the major designers of Philadelphia's post-war apartment buildings. Alongside Oskar Stonerov, who designed Hopkinson House on Washington Square and the Windsor on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway, and Samuel Oshiver, who designed the Savoy and Claridge buildings on Rittenhouse Square and the Philadelphian on the Parkway. Eventually, architects like I.M. Pei would continue what Milton started in Philadelphia with later designs, such as Society Hill Towers, the Municipal Services Building, 5 Penn Center, and others. Meanwhile, Milton's work continued to refine. In 1962, the Dorchester on Rittenhouse Square opened its doors. Like many of Milton's buildings, the recessed facade on the ground floor of this 30-story residential tower not only creates an urban colonnade, but gives an elegant yet visually heavy building the illusion of floating off the ground.
I've always had a soft spot for the Dorchester because it was the first building where the major elements were poured in place concrete, the facade elements, cantilevered balconies, a lot of glass. So I still think it was a pretty good building.
Rittenhouse Square would also soon see the addition of Carlton House, and elsewhere, City Line Avenue would shortly become home to the Green Hill residential buildings.
It was on City Line in the adjacent county. It was quite a controversial project because it was at the foot of a sloping site toward City Line Avenue, and the major hospital was on top of the hill. And they fought like hell to try to kill the project. They tried to kill it, but it couldn't be killed. And I think it's a very good building.
Few Jewish architects in the 1950s and 60s achieved this much success.
There weren't Jewish firms. If you were Jewish, you were never going to have a firm. You were going to work for someone else. And probably like a backroom boy, you see. The people you don't see in the office and the ones who you'd meet on the boards and things like that go by and are visible. And the ones doing the work could be Jewish or black. There's a famous black architect in Philadelphia in that position. And these things come out slowly. Things did improve in some way, and I would imagine that also the New Deal had an effect on that.
In 1964, the Milton Schwartz and Associates designed River Park House opened. Located on a hill with a grand view of the Philadelphia skyline, this is the quintessential machine in the garden. Its heavy mass is lightened by the unrelenting repetition of modular glass and balconies, which are then punctuated by a stern, unadorned vertical element at the centre, unashamedly dividing the building into two symmetrical halves. Although powerful statements, Milton's buildings never overly vie for your attention. They are clean, modern solutions that put their inhabitants' needs first, respecting that a true modernist never builds shrines to himself. Perhaps this is why, to this day, tens of thousands of Philadelphians live and work in Milton's designs, not confronted by the imposition of architectural contemplation, but by designs that allow them to simply go about their lives. Milton's approach worked, and now he was ready for his tallest project yet. The 1700 Market Street office building opened in 1967. The podium of the impressive bank building occupies almost the entire block, with the office tower rising from the east end. The precast facade units, designed to span the distances of the structural grid, are further articulated into vertically oriented glass segments. They are divided by subtle fins, creating not only an overall vertical orientation, but also an equilibrium between opaque and transparent elements. This is the Independence Seaport Museum. Designed by project leader turned partner Bill Aleska, the Seaport Museum is more outwardly focused, addressing the port context in a variety of unique ways, unlike the previously more rigid forms. Gone are the clean lines, the simple shapes. And yet it is quintessentially Milton Schwartz. The sloping orientation of the building creates an amphitheatre-like space, focused on the constructed inlet. The modernist adage that form follows function is distinctly evident by the seemingly drastic shift in language when addressing a new type of site and programme.
So the focus was this body of water in front of the building. where the city exhibited historic ships. So that the roof of that building was used more than any other part of it. It was kind of a grandstand.
Then, in 1974, at the height of his career, Milton Schwartz put down his pencil and left, never to build in Philadelphia again. Today, Milton lives in Sandwich on Cape Cod.
I just got out of the ring. I felt I had fought enough, and I wasn't interested in running a big office and this, that, and the other. And I had made a certain amount of money. I was comfortable. And I enjoyed living in Sandwich.
He moved here intending to settle down. During this period, Milton managed to create some of his most inspiring works, culminating in a true masterpiece, a home for himself, the home of an architect. But finding that old habits die hard, soon he was at it again.
And you know, in Sandwich, they have a committee that rules on the appearance of buildings, and they're all uneducated laymen. I mean by uneducated, nothing to do with architecture. And these guys are dictating what the builder should build. Unbelievable. They refused to permit the town. They didn't like what I was doing, and they came up with these cockamamie reasons. The road wasn't big enough, and I sued the town. We went to court, and I remember when I got up to speak, I introduced myself as a veteran, a former officer in the Corps of Engineers, and an practicing architect. And when I said Corps of Engineers, the judge said, "Young man, that makes two of us." School was out. So he arranged, Judge Major arranged a meeting to visit the site to see why they turned me down. And he visited the site, and his conclusion back afterward, he said, "There's nothing wrong with that road. That's one of the best roads in Sandwich. It looks to me like that's one of the better designed projects in Sandwich." And he approved it.
Philadelphia may not fully realize how much it was shaped by Milton Schwartz, and perhaps not even he himself truly sees how much of an impact he has had. But as he turns 100 years old, perhaps he doesn't need to anymore. From the forefront of the Pacific arena for the invasion of Japan, via Philadelphia, the leading center of America's urban renewal and housing boom, to, finally, the serene beauty and melodic pace of an Atlantic tidal salt marsh. It could be said that the architect Milton Schwartz has had quite a knack for finding himself in the right place at the right time. And that, as he celebrates 100 years of age and achievement, the truth is that through his buildings he will live for hundreds more.